who is the Director of Corporate Management. Mr. Commissioner, you have up to 5 minutes to address the committee. Please proceed.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair and honorable members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to speak with you about the Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner's budgetary submission for 2024-2025. As you know, I have with me Sandy Tremblay, Director of Corporate Management, and Melanie Rushworth, Director of Communications, Outreach and Planning.
I'd like to thank you all and your fellow members for having voted in favor of my permanent appointment. I very much appreciate that vote of confidence. The Commissioner's Office consists of around 50 professionals who are doing everything possible to ensure that 3,200 people subject to the Conflict of Interest Act or the Conflict of Interest Code for members of the House of Commons avoid conflicts of interest. I see the office as having a twofold purpose. One, to help public officials avoid and manage their conflicts of interest. And two, to facilitate the movement of qualified people in and out of the public service. These principles reflect my approach to the role of Commissioner. Ultimately, the goal is to safeguard public confidence and the integrity of elected and appointed officials. Toute personne expérimentée et compétente finit.
All experienced and competent people will, over time, be exposed to potential conflicts of interest. To me, this means the credibility of the advice and guidance provided needs to be both helpful, innovative, and timely. That is why you will see a change to our educational offerings throughout the year.
Its request is an alignment of funding to ensure that the continued growth of the educational and outreach functions of the office. This will allow us to develop a more tailored and subject-specific opportunities to meet the needs of those subject to either regime. These approaches will be online, in person, and on demand. In the near future, an online course specifically tailored to meet the needs of elected members under the code will be launched. Reflecting our efficient approach, the budget for this year reflects an increase of just under 3%, which will be mainly used to offset some cost increases. Melanie, Sandy, and I would be happy to answer any questions you have about our office, our finances, or operations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Just a couple of notes before we do have a little bit of committee business that we need to discuss at the end. First will be the budget for this particular study. We're going to need approval of that at the end. And secondly, just some of the recommendations on the tool extraction data report that's coming up. So I'll discuss, I'll keep a little bit of time at the end for that. So we're going to start with our first 6-minute rounds. Mr. Barrett, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Good morning. Commissioner, how many investigations do you have ongoing today?
2.
How many investigations are ongoing with respect to Sustainable Development Technologies Canada?
The proposal of those are with regard to the sustainable development.
Are you able to undertake preliminary investigations into other board members at SDTC?
As you know, we basically act on requests from the public or members. I have the authority to start investigations of my own, but again, all of this has to be done on the basis of credible evidence or suspicion, etc. And I have seen no reason so far to start anything other than the 2 which we have ongoing.
And with respect to the other members of the board and matters of public record and including committee transcript, you're confident that there's been no reasonable suspicion has been raised that voting members were doing so to materially benefit themselves?
Correct. There has been no evidence of any kind, suspicions or allegations have been raised with regard to the other members.
And of course, if you were presented with new evidence by a member of the Parliament, member of the public, through open source information like media or committee testimony, would you investigate other board members?
Well, it depends on what the information is, how credible it is, how substantive, etc. But if indeed they meet the threshold of that there is something that needs to be investigated, there's sufficient evidence to indicate something contrary to the rules we will present, then we would do it.
Now, in your review or briefs on past files, past investigations, has it been the case that investigations, in this case we're talking about the Board of Sustainable Development Technology Canada, where you're investigating 2 individuals who served on the board, that in similar past circumstances that those investigations could give rise to further investigations of other members of the board based on your past experience?
Well, my past experience is very short, as you know. I don't know whether my
Experience of the
predecessors
office.
I mean, I can just answer basically hypothetically. Yes, it is possible. That, you know, I don't know what has happened. Melanie, do you know of any past investigations that have spawned subsequent investigations?
None that are coming to mind.
Have you been able to obtain all of the information that you've requested, documents, evidence from the Sustainable Development Technologies Canada organization?
Yes.
And so they've been forthcoming. Are you able to share with us who your point of contact is with SDTC? There's been a number of changes with that organization since your investigation commenced.
You're asking me for some detail that actually my investigators know. All I know is that we've asked for information. We got all the information. We asked the witnesses to come forward. They came forward. They were put under oath, and they have testified.
So
if you want to know who actually does it here, who actually we contacted on the organization who's been responding to us, I can get you the name. I don't have it here.
I appreciate that, sir. So am I correct in inferring from your response that you've interviewed both of the subjects of the 2 complaints that you've received from SDTC and that they swore an oath and provided testimony to you?
That's correct.
Could you take us through the investigative process so far for the SDTC file? I appreciate there's information that you're not able to get into until you've presented your report. But I imagine there's a process that you'd follow. Are you able to take us through that and forecast when you would expect the resolution? I know informally, I believe I asked you before, and you said as soon as possible, which I appreciate. But what has the process looked like?
Well, the process, as you appreciate, okay. First of all, the complaint is made. We look at it. We see that there is enough substance to warrant an investigation. Then we do an investigation. We notify the people. We ask them to send us all relevant documents. They send them to us. We examine the documents. On the basis of that, we then structure the questioning. We ask them to come. They put them on their oath. They answer the question. If we need some other people as a result of those questions whose testimony will be relevant, we'll summon them. Same process again. Then once everything is done, we come to a conclusion, write a report. The factual part of the report we send to them saying, hey, these are the facts that we found. Have we anything incorrect or you want to help us? We certainly don't want to misstate the factual situation. They give us a response. And then once we have that, then the whole thing is translated into both languages, and then we publish it. And on the same day, we notify the person who's here. I can tell you now that certainly before the 1st of August, you'll see the report.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Commissioner, I'm just going to ask if you could just speak up just a little bit, if you don't mind. We don't have the ability to put those longer mics on as we have in the past, so if you can just speak up a little bit, that would be terrific, or maybe a little bit closer to the microphone. Mr. Baines, you have 6 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for joining us and with your team again today. When you were last at this committee, you were asked about sponsored travel by a number of MPs. Do the problems associated with sponsored travel, like the apparent limitless value of gifts receivable during a travel, is that a problem for you? Have you given any thought to this since the last time you visited?
You know what the rules are, these are the rules that you yourself passed. It's the code that the House passed for members of the House. So I administer them, I live with them. Could they be improved? That's up to you to decide, and the general public. You know, my job in this case is not to suggest that you change your code, but you decide the code you want to live by, and I apply it.
Thank you for that. When a member believes an investigation is warranted by your office, do you think it's responsible of the member to predetermine the outcome of the investigation and publicly share this view?
Well, I don't think that's the proper behavior, but on the other hand, we live in a country of freedom of speech. They can, of course, say what they want. It's their opinion. That doesn't mean that will be the outcome of the investigation.
Section 13 of the code states, a member shall not participate in debate on or vote on a question in which he or she has a private interest. Does this mean that someone who is advocating for a sector in which they have financial interest during a debate in the House or a committee is violating this part of the code?
Well, it depends again how you define sector, you know, and how large of it. If you're talking about, let's say, farming, you know, and you're a farmer, obviously you can speak on it. If, however, you're a milk farmer, and this is something specifically on milk farming, etc., you know, you probably should not, because that clearly will affect you. But so you have to put it in context what the sector is and what is things that it's proper to contact or not. I get a lot of queries on this very point from you and others, if not from you personally, but from members of Parliament, and we give them the best advice we can under the circumstances.
And on the same point, like, does this extend to voting on government legislation?
Well, again, it depends. If you're voting on something which directly will affect you, etc., you know, you should not do it, because that clearly represents a conflict of interest. But again, you have to look at the vote, what it entails, and what the consequences of that vote is for your situation before you can make that decision.
And now that you're in this role full time, has your office seen an increase in demand in services? If so, how has this affected your capacity and the need for funding?
No, I don't think there has been any change in the volume of work that's come in since I've been appointed permanently. And whatever backlog there was, we managed to deal with it within the first few months of my interim appointment. So right now we are fully staffed and we're meeting the demands as they come to us.
And your office is funded very differently than others that are examined in the main estimates. Could you explain how funding is requested and why it's done in that way?
Cindy, would you like to answer that?
Yes, I can answer that question. Yes, so we operate differently. So basically, the commissioner prepares the main estimates of what will be required for the expenses for the office for the next year, and then this is submitted to the speaker for concurrence, and then it's provided to the Treasury Board, to the President of the Treasury Board, and who submits our main estimates as well as the other government departments to the House of Commons.
Okay, so just to build on that, the 2024 main estimates allocated around $6 million for administration and interpretation of the Conflict of Interest Act and Conflict of Interest Code, as well as around $2.5 million for the internal services. What internal services are offered by your office, and how does the increase in operating budgets positively impact the services that you're able to offer within the office? Maybe back to you.
Yes, so in terms of internal services, we're talking about human resources, financial services, information technology, information management, also some parts of communications, and also some parts of legal services offer internal services. We don't have an increase at all in terms of operations budget, but in terms of the salary budget, we have a small increase in that area. So we had to staff an additional person in information technology But in terms of professional services, I'd say 65% of our operations budget goes to the House of Commons administration because we have a service level agreement in terms of information technology with the House of Commons administration.
That's enough. That's all my questions for today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Baines. La prochaine intervention est pour Monsieur Villemure.
Next question, Mr. Villemure, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello. Thank you for being with us again. Commissioner, I want the office to work well, and I want to be sure that you have all the resources at your disposal for your mandate. Currently, with your mandate, with your budget, do you have the tools that you need? Yes. We have the resources. We can find a lot of the office's documents online, but we do not have documents on the strategic plan for 2024. We have not yet published the strategic plan because it's a decision that we made with the former commissioner, but the team is currently working on a new strategic plan because we need to support the goals of Mr. von Finkenstein. And so that will be the next project for my team this year. But a strategic plan might require more resources. That's why I'm asking you if you have all the resources that you need. We have new ideas and we want to implement them and we need resources. Perhaps next year I'll be here asking for a budget increase. Currently, have you decided on any elements for your next strategic plan that you can share with us? As mentioned, we'll have an online program for the House of Commons. Would you be able to explain it, please, Melanie? We have prepared training for all members following an election, and it will be available in the source system with the House of Commons in the coming months. We've also talked about having something similar for legislation, because when we carried out a survey with public office holders, we noticed that online training opportunities is something that they asked for. We also want to improve the training overall. And so we have sessions on a specific topic, for example, following a mandate, or more specific things that are relevant to members. But my team is always available to offer training and special presentations on demand. For example, with ethics and conflicts of interest, do you believe that online training is enough? Because it can be quite a vast topic. Apologies. With the training, we want to offer a more general idea of the topic and then reinforce that each situation can be different, as Mr. von Finkenstein mentioned. During a debate in the House, for example, everyone has a bit of a different situation. Part of the training always explains that advisors are available at our office to discuss specific situations, but the idea is to give a more general perspective, and people need to then understand what the steps are to be in compliance with either the law or the code. Inaudible. Over the last year, we held about 30 training sessions and about 500 people took these training sessions in the last year. Mr. Commissioner, you've been seeing things for a long time. And if we look at ethics without complaints here, do you believe that the situation is improving? Because it seems to be that things might not be improving in society, for example. Answer. I have read newspapers like you, and clearly there's a lack of trust in ethics, and so it is essential for us to strengthen the importance of ethics and educate elected officials so that they respect the law and the code. And that will have an impact on public opinion. It doesn't help if there are constantly incidents where people are accused of conflict of interest. Thank you for your answer, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Villemure.
For 6 minutes, we're going to go to Mr. Green now. Mr. Green, go ahead.
Thank you very much, and welcome back to the committee. The Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics, typically you post your annual reports online, and you certainly, that was the case between 2021 and 2024 for the strategic plan. The 2018 to 2021 strategic plan is currently available online, but your current plan, the 2021-2024, is not published online. Why is that?
Doesn't exist yet. I was only appointed in September on a temporary basis, and just last month on a permanent basis. And obviously, one of the things to do is to have a new strategic plan. But for the time being, we are living with the one that went to 21 and we basically up to what was it? What was it?
2024.
2024, and we basically will in the coming months try to come up with a new strategic plan setting out our goals.
And when do you said in the coming months, when do you think we can expect that specifically?
Melanie, this is in your hands.
We were awaiting the arrival of the commissioner into the position or someone into the position on a permanent basis before we moved forward with that planning. Our intention is to have some conversations with the commissioner to help him understand the projects that have been undertaken in the last few years and what will be continuing forward, and make sure that what continue forwards reflects that. I would anticipate.
I do have to intervene for a moment. My apologies to take my time back.
Yep.
He was the interim. He's certainly been around. Your intention is to commence this discussion. Has it begun? Or am I to understand it hasn't begun yet?
The conversations have certainly started with the commissioner, but I would anticipate that my team would be in a position to have that plan done this calendar year.
So, Commissioner, back to you. Assuming that there would have been kind of a process for your permanent appointment to this, in your discussions with government as you were finally appointed to this permanent position, what did you identify during the interview process that would be your main priorities, knowing what you know, be it from an interim basis or from your previous work?
Exactly what I said in my opening statement. I think the office is twofold. It is one, to deal with conflict of interest if there's one, but the other side is also to facilitate the entry of the best talent from the public service to the private service and vice versa. And we really have to concentrate on that, because if you do that well, then you have very few conflicts of interest, etc. And so what we are part of is the education, which Melanie talked about. We have done this online now for MPs. We probably will need one to do for the people who are subject to the Act, especially the people who are nominated, and then also to make sure that people understand that this is not something that you just have to do, it's like checking off, yeah, I signed my statement, that's it. No, it has to be something that's on your mind in your daily activity. And, this requires a lot of publication, a lot of speaking publicly, and also using the modern media to get that message out.
That will suffice. Now, into your work, presumably you would have reviewed the previous strategic plans. You would have likely done some financial forecasting to begin to consider a budget. Obviously, we're in budget time. You're here in the main estimates. Did any of the elements of the previous strategic plan require additional financial and human resources?
Yeah, you can answer that best.
Yes. No, so there was no requirement for additional human resources.
So in the time of this term, so we'll call it 2021 till now, how many complaints were filed?
Melanie, do you have the number?
Complaints in what sense? Could you please clarify what you mean?
Complaints to your office, formal written complaints that you would have had to consider whether you pursued or you didn't pursue.
I don't have the number of cases that we looked at specifically in front of me at the moment. They are recorded in our quarterly reports that are posted online, and I'd be happy to compile those and get back to you.
Okay, so if you were to ballpark, what I'm trying to get a sense for is how many active complaints or complaints that you receive versus how many you pursue, to get an understanding of the volume of work and whether or not it's adequate for your office. I hear today that there's only 2. So I would imagine that even within this last year or so, there would likely be more complaints. Could you comment on how many complaints you've had within the last year, fiscal year, so starting in 2023 till now?
Mr. Green, you're using 2 different terms here. One is complaint, one is investigations.
Correct.
Yeah.
I'm trying to discern.
So which number do you want? We can give you the number of investigations right now, 2 as you two.
You've already done that, sir. I'm asking you how many complaints, because I want to see how many complaints you receive versus how many you actually pursue. It's a very basic concept.
Okay, we can get you that number. No problem. I have nothing to hide. I just don't have it here.
Fair enough. Thank you. That'll conclude my round.
Merci, Monsieur Green. Cela conclut notre premier tour.
Thank you, Mr. Green. This concludes our first round of questions. We're going to move on to the second round of questions for 5 minutes. Mr. Brock, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you and good morning to our witnesses. And may I publicly congratulate you, Commissioner, on your full-time status. I want to follow up a little bit on some of the questions posed by my colleague, Mr. Barrett, with respect to the 2 ongoing investigations regarding SDTC. And I trust that you're probably not at liberty to tell us at what point you are in the investigation, but obviously it'll be wrapped up soon enough. At this point in time, have you uncovered any element of criminality associated with the complaints?
No.
Okay. And I want to spend a little more time on the issue of criminality because I know you have a mandate to report to the RCMP. And this was kind of fleshed out the last time you appeared with the former Commissioner Dion. You had legal counsel also assisting in the answering of the questions I put to Commissioner Dion, but I don't think it was sufficient time for me to get a fulsome response. So if I understand correctly, where you detect criminality, the threshold from your perspective, is it correct? It is reasonable and probable grounds.
Yeah, reasonable, definitely. Yeah, probably. I mean, this is like all discussions. You can't define them. That's part of the problem. But when we investigate, we come across something that gives reasonable suspicion that there is some criminality. At that point in time, we stop the investigation. We inform the RCMP and say, "Look at this."
I'm really pleased to hear that, Commissioner, because the takeaway from Commissioner Dion and legal counsel surrounding the SNC Lavalin matter is they felt there was no probable grounds to make a referral to the RCMP. although the RCMP relied upon their report and the evidence contained in that report, I thought that that threshold from a non-law enforcement entity, being your office, was completely inappropriate. What is appropriate, based on your response, is mere suspicion. And I think that's the lowest standard you can have in terms of any criminality. So it's very pleasing to me to hear that during your tenure, that is going to be the legal threshold.
I said reasonable suspicion. I didn't say suspicion. You are a former
I'll
prosecutor.
use your words, sir.
You know the standard.
Yeah, reasonable suspicion, which is a very, very low standard. So in relation now to SDTC, you said you read the papers, you currently know what's going on in the House. It's been dominating the news for some time. We've got another scandal with this Justin Trudeau government, and that is the Arrive scan. Have you received any complaint from any member with respect to Arrive scan to date?
No.
Okay. You also have the mandate under Section 45 of your Act to initiate your own investigations. Based on what you have learned so far, read, or received information with respect to the Arrive scam, is there any prospect that you may be looking into an investigation as to what has transpired with our broken procurement system?
The Arrive scan is a procurement issue. I don't deal with procurement, as you know. I deal with conflict of interest. The parties involved in it so far, and everybody that's been mentioned, is not subject to either the Act or the Code of Conflict. So therefore, there's no reason for me to look into it, start an investigation or anything.
Okay, very well. Thank you. How many agency-initiated complaints, or sorry, not complaints, but investigations, say in the last 3 years, has your office initiated?
I don't have the number. I can get it to you. I'm sorry. Last 3 years.
So is it fair to say you're largely complaint-driven?
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Can you recall the last time that either you were involved or your review of your office's records, whether there was an occasion where your office initiated an investigation on your own?
Well, certainly not during my tenure. But Melanie, I do recall that we've done.
The office the past commissioners have initiated investigations on their own accord without, based upon information that they've come across, without it necessarily being a direct request from a member of parliament or a senator, but I would have to get back to you on the exact number of those.
Thank you. That's my time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brock. Ms. Khalid, for 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you and congratulations, Mr. von Finkenstein, on your appointment. I want to ask you today about Jenny Byrne and Associates and its implications. Now, I know that Ms. Byrne has claimed that she only lobbies at the provincial level, but their media has reported that just days after Pierre Poilievre's election as leader of the Conservative Party, the lobbying firm run by Pierre Poilievre's top strategist, Jenny Byrne, established a second company, Forecheck Strategies, housed out of the same office for the purposes of lobbying federally. Now, are you aware of this situation?
You know, I'm not responsible for lobbying. Ms. Bélanger, you will appear after me. You should ask her these questions.
Now, have you been in touch with any of the Conservative members with respect to this issue at all?
As I say, I mean, I deal with conflict of interest. Neither Ms. Byrne nor is responsible under the Conflict of Interest Act or the Code. So all these activities that she's doing are totally outside my remit.
So can I then ask you, what is the definition of a minister's staff, perhaps as it applies to the code? The ministerial staff are obviously people that the minister hires to advise him, right? And the ministerial staff
subject to the Conflict of Interest Act, yes, no question about it. But it is the I don't know what further definition to give you. It's somebody that the minister hires to advise him in his function of his office.
So when we talk about the benefits that are received or a relationship that may have that conflict of interest in terms of how a political party acts and how their interaction is with lobbying firms, do you not see that as a conflict of interest at all, or that's something that you should be concerned about?
You got to give me a specific fact situation and the details of what you think is there, and that is a concern. If it is in a violation or possible violation of the Act, obviously we will look at it. But I just purely speaking hypothetically and throwing a name at me, I'm sorry, I can't give you a more complete answer.
I mean, you're asking for specific facts. Now, reports have indicated that Ms. Byrne attends regular caucus meetings which are typically reserved for conservative members of parliament, senators, and top staff. Reporting also details Ms. Byrne's active participation in morning strategy calls within the opposition leader's office. Now, to me, that seems like there is a specific relationship there, and that should be covered by the Act. Now, would you not agree with that?
Ms. Byrne is a private consultant, is she not?
A private consultant who happens to be the top strategist for a political party with specific interests with her company and her lobbying.
Right. Where is the conflict here?
Well, that's exactly what I'm asking you, sir. You are the expert here. I would like to have a better understanding as to how it is that a private company can sit and have political influence and strategize with a political party, and that you don't question how that occurs, or what implications there are, private or public, what kind of political influence there is happening.
Surely my job is to make sure that a public official does not abuse the information and create a conflict of interest here. How they conduct their own political activity, whom they consult, etc., that's not part of it. I've failed to see from what you just put forward to me that you invite these people to your sessions. Well, if you want that, that's your problem. What has this got to do with your official duties? I don't understand it. I'm so sorry. I don't see how this.
Well, I will definitely clarify now. It is my belief that the role that Ms. Byrne plays within the Conservative Party is similar, and if not the same, as what a minister's staff plays. And to have those conflicts of differing interests here, I think is a flag for conflict of interest. Have you looked into this matter at all? Has anybody brought this up to you?
Very quick response.
No, I have not looked at it, and nobody has raised it before, except you today.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Khalid. Monsieur Villemure pour 2 minutes et demie.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. You talked about, Ms. Rushworth, you talked about training on conflict of interest, and we noticed in the report for 2021-2022 that you hadn't, or that the office hadn't spent all the funds allocated. Is there a reason for that? 2021-2022 or 23-24? 2021-2022. In 2021-2022, we had a surplus of $286,000, and that represented 4%. But last year, 23-24, we had a larger surplus because we didn't have a commissioner, and so we had to wait for nominations, and so that's why. Understood. Mr. Commissioner, what are your short-term and long-term challenges? Short-term, I think it would be communicating the strategy that I announced. We want to facilitate the transfer of talent from the public and private sector and avoid conflicts of interest. Up until now, we've focused on the conflict of interest, and we haven't examined secondary tasks. Secondly, we want to create tools that will help elected officials and with the online training, we want to do the same thing for elected officials. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Villemur. Mr. Green?
Let's go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. I just want to speak a little bit to the process of funding. You, before each fiscal year, prepare an estimate for the budgetary requirements. It's considered by the Speaker of the House and then transmitted to the President of the Treasury Board, who lays it before the House with the estimates of the government. How does this differ from processes by which other officers of Parliament receive their funding?
Sandy, go ahead.
Yes. Well, how it differs is we don't have a minister that actually approves the main estimates that we propose. So it comes here for approval, but that's how it differs. We don't have a minister responsible for us. It's the Speaker that acts as the minister for the office, but he or she does not approve. They just consider the estimates, but there's no approval.
And what are the benefits or the drawbacks of that budget process for your office?
Well, for us, it makes it a lot easier because we can manage our project. The commissioner can decide what he wants to push forward. There's no one approving or disapproving the request that we're asking, or whatever the commissioner decides that his priorities are for the next year and how he will manage these resources.
And just for the record, sorry, can you again state your role and how long you've been in it?
My role?
Yes, please.
Oh, I'm the Director of Corporate Management. I'm also the Chief Financial Officer for the office, and I've been in this role since June 2016, so almost 8 years now.
Have you had instances where requests for estimates haven't been met or your budgetary requirements haven't been met? Have you ever had that in your recollection?
No, that's never happened before. But we've never asked for, everything that we've asked. Usually it represents a small increase every year in terms of economic increases and salary increments, and it's the same case this year.
And so minus the gapping that you would have had by not having a permanent person in there, would you have found upward pressures given the cost of living, given collective agreements and everything else? Are you able to adequately meet the demands? And forgive me if I came off pretty sharp in the last round, but I was trying to find out how many complaints go in, how many are investigated, is there a gap there? And if so, why? Is it funding? Could you use more people given the kind of state we're in, the lack of trust, the cynicism that we have in government? Because in my estimation, if an allegation was made against me, I would want it quickly investigated and I would want it turned around. When it's not pursued or perhaps when it's dismissed, then it kind of leaves it hanging out there without that conclusion. So in your opinion, does your full-time complement of staff meet the demand, the growing demand for complaints?
Yes.
And
So far it has.
Very, very quick response, please.
So far it has. I just have to say that the most of our budget is for advisors, so it doesn't go to investigations and legal services. It's mostly for advisors, as it's about 40% of our complement. So we have not had any issues in terms of budget to be able to answer or to respond to complaints.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Green, Madame Tremblay. We are in our last 5-minute rounds. We're going to start with Mr. Kirk, suivi par Madame Lapointe. Go ahead, Mr. Kirk, for 5.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the Commissioner. Congratulations officially and on the record for your permanent appointment. 7 years, I believe, is the term, and certainly that continuity is important. I find it interesting the Liberals' line of questioning. It seems like they're auditioning to be in the official opposition when it's their record that certainly their Prime Minister, twice convicted of breaching the Conflict of Interest Act, cabinet ministers, members of their party who have broken and found guilty breaking the act. And, Liberals' top pollster, Don Guy, lobbies the government. So we're not talking about, somebody who has lobbied the opposition, but, their top pollster, the one that's given them the information, lobbies the government for dollars. I tell you, that's certainly concerning to me. And former Liberal Cabinet Minister Navdeep Bains got he was responsible for regulating telcos and then gets a VP position at one of the national highly regulated telcos in our country. I tell you, it is quite something to hear these Liberals equivocate on such matters. Commissioner, I do want to ask, though, because something we heard pretty specifically from your predecessor, that training was certainly an issue, and you outlined a few of the efforts that you're undertaking to make sure that resources are available to MPs and others that have responsibilities under the Act. So I do want to ask, though, what is the response to those training materials? And then a follow-up question to that is in the context of the availability of you and your team to be able to answer questions, to be able to speak with those who have obligations under the Act, to be able to answer those questions, to make sure that those who have obligations are able to understand exactly what those are. So first, if you want to outline a little bit more about what training opportunities you're providing, because I believe the former commissioner had said that it should be, there should be a mandatory retraining course. So I want to ask you about some of those resources, but then if you could outline what is the response, and do you have, if you could provide maybe information about the number of MPs, others that are subject to the Act, reaching out to your office, so you could explain to both this committee but also Canadians who might be watching about the resources that are available to make sure that those who have obligations have the information required to make sure they don't break the rules.
Okay. Melanie, answer the first question.
Absolutely. So there's a number of different pieces of training that are available from the office. As I explained, we've just recently finished the online training for MPs, and I've requested funding to be able to produce the similar type of product under the Act in the next fiscal year. One of the other things that we've recently completed is a survey of public office holders, similar to the one that we did a couple of years ago with members of Parliament, and asking them about the types of services from the office. From that, we know that they are happy with the training that they are receiving, but they would like to see some more topic-specific training, and we will continue to work on that. Similarly, making sure that we're responsive to the needs of the public. You mentioned people coming to us for information. In the course of a year, my team responds to in excess of 3,000 queries that come in from members of the public or the media, and we respond to all of those to let them understand what our role is and how we can help them.
Could I just, you mentioned some numbers there. Do you have, any information about the number of times that, MPs, and I know all MPs have to do the yearly filings and whatnot, but when it comes to like queries, do you have any numbers about, how often an MP or others that might have obligations under the Act reach out to your office to be able to request information, to ask about obligations, to ask for that information, to again make sure that those who are subject have the information required so that they don't break the rules?
Absolutely. Our yearly average is just in excess of 3,000 requests for advice that come into that team also. Last year, it was about 15% higher than the yearly average. And I can tell you also that their questions mainly pertain to material change, general obligations, as well as post-employment, which applies under the Act but not under the Code. In that, we are able to meet our service standards. Other members of this committee were asking about our ability to meet the demand. We are able to meet our service standards when someone, a member of Parliament or public office holder calls, they are responded to within 3 days.
I appreciate that. So I guess my takeaway from this certainly is that there is no excuse for anybody who has obligations under the Code. They can get the information from you to make sure that they don't break the rules. It's just unfortunate sometimes that it seems that we have a government that seems to care less about being willing to follow the rules.
Thank you, Mr. Kirk. Madame Lapointe, pour 5 minutes.
You have 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think it's important for members of the public that may be listening in today to talk about the important role that your office plays. I mean, as the Commissioner, you administer the Conflict of Interest Act as well as the Conflict of Interest Code, and you do that with the aim of ensuring that public office holders and members do not use their positions to further their financial or private interests. I think the other very important thing for viewers to know is that the Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics is independent and nonpartisan, and I think that's very important. Can you tell us how can we reassure Canadians that your office is free from political interference?
Well, first of all, the appointment process, right? People have to apply. They have an interview. The interview process involves people from the government and a couple of people from the private sector. In my case, it was a retired judge who sat on the panel, etc. And then whoever the selection is, it's put forward to all the parties in the House, and they have to vote. So this will happen in my case, and it was a unanimous vote. So if effectively nobody saw any problem. Now it's obviously the conduct will tell that if I would be in any way partisan or anybody occupying this position, the whole issue would be lost. I mean, it has the raison d'etre is that we make decisions on the basis of objective fact, not on what of our political leanings are or our philosophical leanings. And, you know, that's the appointment requires that you be a former judge or you have formerly run in an independent organization. I've done both, so hopefully that will give people some assurance that we will act nonpartisan.
Yeah. I was interested in one of the responses that you gave to a question of my colleague, Député Villemur, where you talked about how today there's a lack of confidence today in ethics, and how important it is to reinforce that. Can you tell me how your office does do that in terms of reinforcement?
Well, you know, there's no magic bullet. There's no. It's basically education, using every media possible in order to get the message out, and certainly having investigations and calling it as it is, making sure that, you know, where there is a conflict of interest, we highlighted it and we explained why, and hopefully it will serve as a deterrent for others. Melanie is my director of communication, and she spends a lot of time in basically getting the message out. There is a code you have to abide by, etc. So Melanie, why don't you tell some of the activities you're doing?
So in addition to responding to public queries that come into our inbox or by telephone, we also pay attention to some of the statistics in the office to understand the types of questions that public office holders or members of parliament are asking of us, and try and make sure we think that through when we're also communicating externally, when we're answering media queries, et cetera, to try and weave those topics of interest into our responses in that way. And then, obviously, when we are asked for presentations, we go and deliver those also.
Commissioner, what do you consider to be your greatest challenge facing your office today?
It's a good question. Probably trying to make understanding the digital challenge and understanding what it represents to the whole government, including my office, and how to use it positively. We all see how it's being used quite often negatively, etc. But it can also be a very useful tool. But I don't think we have really mastered it. We're not really, you know, to what extent can we use social media or other to get our message out better, to educate people, and to instill confidence. You know. I think that we are all struggling with it, with the digital channel in every sphere of our life, and in mine included.
I think it's important that as members we're accountable, and I would suggest that the same applies to your office. How do you measure your work in terms of not only, I'm not talking only about process outcomes, but more specifically outcome measures to be able to demonstrate the effectiveness of your work for Canadians?
Well, it's rather difficult because what we do is all confidential. You know, I can only give you numbers of the number of people who have consulted us, who have been involved, etc. To the extent that when people get in contact with my office and they ask a question or they want advice on something, we give it. And if they wouldn't follow it, because we say you have to do this and this, otherwise you're compensated, but there would be a breach, and obviously we would start an investigation, you know, etc. There's never anything of that sort. So essentially, to the extent that people consult with us, we give advice and they follow it. There's never, and that's the best thing is to try to get people to come forward and consult. As Melanie shows you, the numbers go up each year, which is somewhat supportive of the fact that we're actually effective. But given that all we do is, for logical reasons, confidential and cannot share it with you, it's very hard to measure outcome in any other way.
Thank you.
Aussi.
Merci, Madame Lapointe. Merci encore.
Thank you, Ms. Lapointe. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner, for your testimony today. Thank you, Ms. Tremblay and Ms. Rushworth as well. We are going to suspend for a few minutes to prepare for the next panel with Ms. Bélanger. On behalf of the committee, thank you, Mr. Commissioner, for being with us today. We are suspended for a few minutes.